Aloha and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the second session of Adapting to COVID-19, Indonesia, the United States, and the Indo-Pacific virtual forum series on threats in the US and Indonesia, held with support from the US Embassy Jakarta and in partnership with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Indonesia. This 9-part virtual series will address broad, cross-cutting issues that impact both countries: emerging security issues, COVID-19, regional and bilateral trade and investment, and democracy and civil society. It will feature American and Indonesian experts with diverse yet complementary backgrounds to examine the trajectory of US-Indonesia relations in the new normal. My name is Crystal Pryor, and I'm Director of Nonproliferation, Technology, and Fellowships at the Pacific Forum. Please note that this session includes simultaneous interpretation. You may access the English or Bahasa Indonesia channels using the globe on the bottom right portion of your screen. Our first session explored regional trade and the challenges of the post-COVID-19 economy. Key findings from that session included that in the Indo-Pacific, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, and the Comprehensive and Progressive, or CPTPP, continued to provide a platform that could enable post-COVID-19 economic recovery. In the midst of the pandemic, these regional economic integration initiatives have strengthened cooperation between Indonesia and other ASEAN member states, alongside key external partners such as the United States, Japan, China, and South Korea. Both RCEP and CPTPP are expected to play a major contribution to global economic growth and trade by 2030, especially if the US and India are involved in the coming years. You can view our key findings at the link in the chat box now. We'll also post an edited video in Indonesian and English to Pacific Forum's YouTube channel in the near future. Today's session will focus on current trends in regional cybersecurity. The United States and Southeast Asia have witnessed a spike in cybercrimes since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is being used to spread disinformation as well as to conduct financially motivated, malicious campaigns, including email spam, business email compromise, malware, ransomware, and malicious domains. Across the US and Southeast Asia, ransomware attacks have been targeting healthcare, education, transport, and manufacturing sectors. Recent attacks have also targeted critical infrastructure worldwide, such as hospitals and vaccine research labs. The Indonesian National Cyber and Encryption Agency found that during January through August of 2020, there were 190 million cybercrime attempts in Indonesia, 4 times more than in the same period the previous year. Moving forward, it's important for Indonesia to create and support a strategic cyber environment, create safe and secure national cyber infrastructure, enhance cyber competitiveness and innovation, and build awareness and sensitivity to national security and resilience in cyberspace. Thus, this session will discuss current trends in the cybersecurity of critical national infrastructure, the rise of cybercrime in the new normal, and examine potential avenues for enhanced cooperation between the United States and Indonesia. Please note that remarks made in today's program are on the record, and a video and audio recording of this session will be made available on Pacific Forum's website and social media in the future. This event is also being live streamed on CSIS's YouTube channel. As a reminder to our speakers today, please speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters. I'd now like to introduce Ms. Delaria Austin, Political Professional Associate at the US Embassy Jakarta, to give some brief welcome remarks. Ms. Austin?
Yes, hi. Selamat pagi semua. Good morning. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy, it's my honor to welcome you to session 2 of the virtual forum series on assessing cybersecurity trends and threats in the United States and Indonesia. Let me introduce myself. My name is Delia Austin, and I work in the political section of the U.S. Embassy. I've been in Jakarta for 2.5 years, and I have had privilege to work with the government of Indonesia on strengthening cyber cooperation between our governments. As more companies in Indonesia and worldwide have moved to online platforms and online data usage increased during the pandemic, the cases of cybercrime also skyrocketed. In the United States, we have experienced difficulties keeping our cyberspace secure due to major security breaches and a high rate of cyber attacks. The United States government puts a high priority on cybersecurity. President Biden stated last month as part of a national security speech at the State Department that he has elevated the status of cyber issues within our government and is launching an urgent initiative to improve our capability, readiness, and resilience in cyberspace. As technology advances, so do tactics used by malicious actors to obtain personal information and threaten our networks. To maximize cybersecurity and mitigate risk, all levels of government and the private sector must strengthen their partnerships to better exchange information. Our governments enjoy strong cooperation in many areas, including national cyber strategy development, capacity building, cybersecurity awareness, and incident management. We look forward to further enhancing our robust partnership. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy Jakarta, I would like to thank CSIS and the entire team at the Pacific Forum International. We're also very grateful to the Indonesian Cybersecurity Forum and to its chairman and founder, Pak Ardi Sutedja, for partnering with us. Thanks to our expert speakers, Juan Hardoy from Microsoft and Elina Noor from the Asia Society Policy Institute. And finally, I hope all the participants are able to get new key information and are able to gain new perspective from this webinar. Enjoy the event. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Austin. Again, I'm the overall MC for this event, Crystal Pryor. But Fitriani from CSIS Indonesia will be moderating today's discussion, which will include feedback and Q&A with the audience. Later, participants will be allowed to unmute their mics to ask questions or give feedback, as well as ask questions in the Q&A box. Participants' cameras are disabled throughout the session. We'll also have interactive features like polling as we go along. Here is today's poll. So the question is, what is the most effective joint solution that the US and Indonesia can pursue to mitigate the emerging risks and vulnerabilities in cyberspace? Raise cybersecurity awareness of cyber hygiene and cyber resiliency, improve cybersecurity public-private partnerships, invest in media and digital literacy to tackle fake news and disinformation, or foster great threat information sharing between the US and Indonesia. While we're waiting on those poll results, I'll also note that we have a survey we'd like you to complete after the event concludes. Please find the link to the survey in the chat box now. I'll give a few more seconds for some more respondents to the poll. We have about 1/3 of people having voted so far. On the most effective joint solution the US and Indonesia can pursue to mitigate the emerging risks and vulnerabilities in cyberspace. All right, I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with everybody. So the #1 answer is actually tied, which was to raise cybersecurity awareness of cyber hygiene and cyber resiliency, tied with invest in media and digital literacy to tackle fake news and disinformation, followed by a close third, with foster great threat information sharing. And finally, improve cybersecurity, public-private partnerships in last place. So you can keep those answers in mind as we move forward and think about whether you would still choose the same answer after the end of today's session. So close that. And now to today's session. I will hand over the mic to Fitriani, researcher at CSIS, to moderate the discussion and the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Crystal. My name is Fitri, and I'm a researcher at CSIS Indonesia. Today, we will do the 3 presentations together, followed by the Q&A discussion. This is a friendly reminder for the speaker to keep their presentation to 10 minutes so we can have ample time for question and discussion. The whole session is 90 minutes in total. Please remember to speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters. You may access the live interpretation features using the globe at the bottom right portion of your screen. Note that participants, you may raise your hand or submit question in the Q&A box as you have them during presentation. You don't have to save it until the end, just in case you might forget them. Today presenter for assessing cybersecurity trends and threats in the US and Indonesia are firstly, Juan Hardoy, the Assistant General Counsel from Digital Crimes Unit, Microsoft. Second, we have Elina Noor, Director, Political Security Affairs and Deputy Director from Washington, D.C. office of the Asia Society Policy Institute. And last but not least, Mr. Ardi Sutedja, Chairman and Founder, Indonesian Cybersecurity Forum. First up, I will call Juan Hardoy, that works as an Assistant General Counsel in Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, where he leads a team working to fight technology-facilitated crime against vulnerable population, including children and elderly. Juan also managed DCU Global Field Operation, which includes a team of former law enforcement official, investigator, intelligence analysts, paralegal, forensic specialists, and attorneys focusing on enforcement and intelligence effort against organized criminal and other illicit organizations engaged in cybercrime. He has collaborated extensively with prosecutors and law enforcement officials since he joined Microsoft in 2003. Before joining Microsoft, Juan works with Alin and Brea in Argentina and Proskauer Bros LLP in New York. He's currently based at the company headquarters in Redmond, and he's also a graduate of University of Buenos Aires Law School. Juan, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Fitri, Crystal, Diliara. It is an honor for me to be part of this forum today. In these 10 minutes, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the impact of cybercrime and about our unit, the Digital Crimes Unit, our mission, the different categories of cybercrime we concentrate on. And then I will give you an update of what we have seen over this past unprecedented year of the pandemic. So we all know that cyber criminals are incredibly sophisticated. They are evolving at the speed of light. They are very well financed. They are not limited by borders. In addition, over the last year, we have seen that they have changed their teams and their tactics to exploit COVID-19 fears, whether they are healthcare fears or financial fears. I will talk to that in a minute and during this discussion. So who's the DCU? The Digital Crimes Unit is a unique team within Microsoft, and we are focused on disrupting some of the most difficult cybercrime threats facing society today. We are an international team of lawyers, investigators, and analysts that leverage cutting-edge tools, technologies, and novel legal theories to increase the security of our cloud services, and to promote global trust in Microsoft, with always our customers at the center. Customer protection is our mission. But we don't do this alone. I was happy to vote for the public-private partnership option. And I was happy to see that it came out first with the other one, which is also a very good one, because I do believe that the only way we're going to succeed is if we work together in a joint public-private partnership, because nobody has all the assets to face cyber criminals. As I said, they are very well financed and they are very sophisticated and they're super smart. We don't do this alone in Microsoft. Across industry, NGOs, academia, international law enforcement, we work together to put cyber criminals out of business and create a safe digital world. There's many different types of cybercrime. Next slide, please. And we concentrate in the following categories: business email compromise, Azure fraud, this is our cloud service, malware, ransomware, online child exploitation, tech scams, and business operation integrity, which includes supply chain. Let me talk a little bit about this. I'm not going to have time to cover all of them, but I will touch upon a few. Malware, let me start with that one. Malware and botnets. We play offense against criminal syndicates that seek to profit from malware and botnets. Botnets are armies of infected computers. Obviously, the victims don't know that the criminals have infected their computers to commit cybercrime. Today, we have launched over 15 international enforcement actions against these criminal syndicates in cooperation with international law enforcement like Europol, Interpol, FBI. Through this unique offensive capability, we were able to glean the intelligence that allowed us to clean infected machines and redirect IP addresses associated with machines that are still infected to a sinkhole in the Cybercrime Center. Cybercrime Center is our headquarters in Redmond, Washington State, in the United States. It opened in 2013, and it houses our working laboratories. And in there, we have this sinkhole. Sinkhole is like a database, a repository. We share that information of IP addresses associated with infected machines with malware with over 35 government organizations around the world. We share this freely with them to enable them to better protect their critical computer infrastructure. Business email compromise. Let me talk about, a little bit about business email compromise. This type of crime is on the rise. Back in March, we worked and collaborated with the US Department of Justice to provide IOCs, instances of or indicators of compromise related to COVID-19. What we noticed back in March, 1 year ago, was that criminals were changing their themes. So the same threat actor that was attempting to compromise our customers via phishing attacks has rethemed its attack to use COVID lures, preying on financial fears, for instance. So they would send emails pretending to be, a coworker, claiming that they had information about people's bonuses or compensation affected by COVID-19 in a corporation. And they would prompt their victims to click on the wrong link and to give away their credentials or use some other methods to obtain or gain unauthorized access to their email accounts. Once the email accounts have been compromised, these criminals will set up forwarding rules in the email inboxes and will start to monitor all the traffic, and in particular some keywords like payment, overdue, IBAN, invoice. Once the criminal detected that a financial transaction was about to happen, they would intervene and provide fake or the wrong transfer information, wire transfer information to the victim so that the money can end up in their bank account and not where it was supposed to be. Microsoft and the DCU took action in the US against this threat actor, and we obtained a temporary restraining order that allowed us to repossess domains that were used to impersonate other companies and lure victims and tricking victims into giving away their credentials. We did this back in June when COVID-19 cybercrime was on the rise. The tactics were the same, but the themes were different. On tech fraud, that's another type of crime we concentrate on, tech support scams. This is when criminals call my mother at home claiming that they work for Microsoft or for some other company like Apple, Google, or Amazon. And they tell my mom that her computer is infected and that she needs a service to clean her computer, or that there's some other problem with her system. My mom, obviously, she's not tech savvy, so she would probably fall for it. Interestingly, during the lockdown, we saw a decline in calls or victim reports from associated with this type of crime, because call centers, wherever they are located in the world, couldn't operate. And then when the lockdown was mitigated or released, in some places we saw an increase again in this type of crime. So COVID-19 has affected cybercrime in different ways. But nevertheless, overall, across the year, we have seen an increase in this type of crime. Microsoft works on three main pillars: engineering, which is what probably we do best because we are a cloud services and software company; education and enforcement. The best way to prevent this type of crimes, cybercrime, is to educate ourselves about the risks and issues of cybercrime. And we also work on enforcement. This is what characterizes the DCU from any other security team within Microsoft. There's many security teams in the company, but DCU takes proactive legal action. We bring civil actions and criminal actions, criminal referrals in the US and international. For this, we leverage advanced analytics and investigations to gather evidence and make those referrals. We use the latest technologies. We use machine learning in things like tech support scams to combat tech support scams to help the work of our investigators. In these 10 minutes, unfortunately, I cannot showcase how we use it, but maybe in the course of this discussion, the topic will come up and I will explain in more detail what those techniques are. We use the power of our cloud to do investigations, to do analytics, advanced analytics. Everybody should know that, unfortunately, criminals, because they are well-financed, they are using cloud services to enhance their criminal capabilities too. And that's a growing problem. Finally, I wanted to touch upon very quickly the other types of cybercrime we concentrate on. Online child exploitation. This is also a very concerning and growing problem. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has identified, in collaboration with law enforcement, millions of pictures of child abuse on the internet. The problem is to find them and to remove them. So Microsoft has developed PhotoDNA, which is a technology that allows companies like Microsoft and many others like Facebook, Google, to scan their services and find known pictures of child abuse and remove them automatically, and then report to law enforcement via the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children the information about the subscriber of that account using the service. So for instance, if there's a Hotmail account or a Outlook account or a Skype account exchanging images of child abuse that are known, that have been hashed, PhotoDNA will detect it, and we will make a cyber tip to NCMEC, and NCMEC will work with law enforcement to advance prosecution. The DCU, in addition to that, provides a supplemental report in some instances when we identify repeat offenders that will give additional information on the location and identity of people behind that crime. Those that are repeatedly using our services like Skype, Hotmail, as I mentioned, to exchange pictures of child abuse. Every time one of those pictures is shared, the child gets victimized again. Ransomware. This is another type of crime that's on the rise. When I was in Europe, I worked for the DCU 7 years in Europe. In my collaboration with Europol, this crime was #1 in their agenda as in terms of victims. Ransomware is a high-profit, low-cost business. And in 2020, last year, we saw a transition from automatically spreading ransomware like NotPetya and WannaCry to more human-operated targeted attacks. In DCU, we work to disrupt this type of cybercrime and increase the cost of the crime and reduce the profitability. We're not going to enforce our way out, just to conclude, we're not going to enforce our way out of cybercrime, unfortunately. And I wanted to, again, emphasize the importance of public-private partnerships and in putting more attention to disruption, technical disruption. It's very difficult to investigate and bring to justice all cybercrime. We heard from Gilara the staggering amount of cybercrime incidents in Indonesia at the beginning of this session today at this forum. And it's impossible to prosecute all those crimes, right? So we need to work together to disrupt the criminal infrastructure. And this is what DCU is going to be concentrated on, together with enforcement, education, and engineering. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, for a very informative presentation. Sorry, I have to change my background because our timer stopped. I hope it wasn't that, shocking. Thank you, Juan. Next, we have Ms. Elina Noor, Director from Political Security Affairs and Deputy Director, Washington, D.C. Office at the Asia Society Policy Institute. Elina Noor is native of Malaysia, and her work focuses on security development in Southeast Asia, global governance and technology, as well as preventing and countering violent extremism. Previously, Elina was Associate Professor at the Daniel K. Inouye Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies. Prior to that, she was Director of Foreign Policy and Security Studies at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia. Between 2017 and 2019, Elina was a member of the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace. She was educated at Oxford University, the London School of Economics and Political Science, and Georgetown University. Elina, are you ready? The screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Fitri, and thank you to the organizers for this opportunity to contribute to this discussion. Crystal, in her introduction, mentioned a number of challenges from cybercrime to disinformation, from cyber competitiveness to national security. There are as many ways to approach this topic as there are the number of Indonesian islands. So let me just zoom out a little from Juan's perspective to offer 3 broader points for consideration. The first has to do with Indonesia's and indeed Southeast Asia's cyber landscape in general. Throughout the ASEAN region, digitalization has been driven by development priorities, And it is this focus on economic growth that has seen a convergence of government policies, private sector investments, and consumer market growth online. Indonesia, of course, is home to a number of unicorns like Tokopedia and Bukalapak, even a decacorn in Gojek. But most of the country's economy is really driven by micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs. In fact, MSMEs are the linchpin of most Southeast Asian economies, with the Asian Development Bank estimating them to constitute an average of 97% of all enterprises and 69% of the national labor force from 2010 to 2019. MSMEs contributed an average of 41% of each country's GDP over that same period. In Indonesia, the numbers are even larger. MSMEs make up 99% of existing businesses and generate more than 60% of the national GDP. This is significant for our discussion because as more MSMEs seek to leverage cyberspace to grow their businesses, the more exposed they will be to cyber threats like phishing and ransomware. In fact, last year at the height of COVID, phishing attacks mostly targeted SMEs, and the number of such attacks increased by 56% from the previous year. Now, with apologies to Microsoft and to Juan, Kaspersky's data show that Indonesia accounted for the highest number of phishing attacks at about nearly 750,000. And the same with ransomware. Again, Kaspersky, as quoted in Interpol's ASEAN Cyber Threat Assessment 2021, found that among the 10 ASEAN member countries, Indonesia suffered the most with 1.3 million cases, accounting for almost half of the entire detections in the region. The point of all these figures is to say that given how MSMEs are the fulcrum of Indonesia's economy, and given how important it is to protect this group of contributors to the digital economy, there are avenues of capacity building cooperation between the US and Indonesia to be explored in this regard, perhaps through expanded private sector partnerships that Juan talked about, and perhaps under the umbrella of a reinvigorated US-Indonesia comprehensive partnership. If my first point was in relation to MSMEs and cybercrime, my second point has to do with the larger custodians of a country's cyber defense. These include government actors such as the National Security Council, the BSSN in Indonesia, as well as the military. I know that there have been annual information system and technology exchange exercises involving Indonesia as part of Hawaii's National Guard's state partnership program. But I think it's also important to have the public and private sectors of any country in Southeast Asia to exercise together domestically in the event of a significant cyber operation impacting the critical national infrastructure of a country, such as the financial, health, or transport sector. ASEAN banks were particularly popular targets of phishing attacks last year, but larger, more sophisticated attacks, particularly as supported with greater state-backed resources, could require a substantial level of trust, coordination, and operational familiarity between the country's public and private sectors in order to mount a credible cyber defense, or to at least ensure sufficient resilience to such cyber attacks. My final point is this, that although the threats to the region, to Indonesia, are largely from cyber criminals, the distinction between these perpetrators and more sophisticated ones is becoming increasingly blurred, particularly with cybercrime as a service complete with after-sales support and service. The larger looming threat is when geopolitical clashes reverberate through cyberspace and major powers extend their reach into this domain, whether through advanced persistent threats or through expansive definitions of cyber defense, to attain their own interests by way of Southeast Asia. After all, the region is not only strategic geographically, but also geotechnologically. Indonesia's representation in the current iteration of the UN Group of Governmental Experts means that the country is well aware and well entrenched in the norms and international law discussions surrounding cyberspace. Fitri herself has been involved in these discussions. As part of ASEAN, though, Indonesia and all other member states are also embarking on a norms implementation checklist exercise that will get the region one step closer to bridging the gap between theory and practice. But it's also important for Indonesia and the rest of the region to table its own understanding of what the preservation of international peace and security means in cyberspace, what kinds and levels of cyber attacks would trigger international law provisions in this part of the world, and what sorts of responses might be available to the region. And in this regard, Indonesia, as the de facto leader of ASEAN, just by dint of size and weight, should perhaps or could perhaps be a leader as well in this cyber domain. I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elina. I really appreciate that you fit within your time allocation, and thank you for mentioning me in Indonesia and our responsibility for the region, at least if it's not globally. Thank you. Now, last but not least, I will call Mr. Ardi Sutedja, the founder and chairman of the Indonesia Cybersecurity Forum, ICSF. ICSF is a non-profit professional organization established and based in Jakarta, Indonesia, whose mission is to promote and nurture cybersecurity and resilience in Indonesia. Ardi is also the president director of Indonesia Dirgantara Expo, IDEX, an event organizing management company focusing on ICT, aviation, and maritimes event. Pak Ardi also is a former board of trustees and senior advisor of Indonesia ICT Community, or MASTEL. Prior to his current roles at ICFF, IDEX, and MASTEL, Pak Ardi has more than 28 years of professional experience both in private and public sectors, focusing on cybersecurity strategy, governance, and compliance, IT risk assessment, cyber threats, vulnerability assessment, IT security design and implementation, and incident management and data loss protection and privacy services. In addition, Pak Ardi is now expanding his focus to include managing the risks arising from emerging technology and social media. Pak Ardi earned his bachelor degree in law from the University of Indonesia and a master of Business Administration from the State University of New York in Buffalo, USA. Pak Ardi, are you ready?
Yes.
Thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Fitri, and very good morning to everyone from across the globe. And thank you for having me on this panel this morning, a very interesting discussion. Due to time limitation, I'm just going to run through some of the key points that what ICSF stands for with regards to cybersecurity in Indonesia. Yeah. First of all, ICSF itself is the only multi-stakeholder group, professional group that oversees the promoting cybersecurity in Indonesia, and we are quite a strong organization with membership from all walks of life. We have people from the government, we have people from the military, we have people from the national police, we have people from the academics, and we also have very common people on our membership. And because of this unique position that we are in, we are able to see cybersecurity maybe at a different view compared to other people. That's why I'm going to share with you what ICSF stands for in Indonesia's cybersecurity landscape. Yeah. Let me just share my screen if I may. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to run them through quickly. Yeah. First of all, Indonesia is not new to cyber attack. Yeah. We are not new into what everyone referred to as cyber intrusion. We have experienced all of them. That is why when we we initiate what is now called the National Cybersecurity Agency, or BSSN, we have actually already foreseen what is going to happen in the future. Yeah, that's why we have to look at cybersecurity from a very, very broad view. Yeah, we call it from a helicopter view, and we have to see everything about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not only what we know today. Yeah, we're not looking cybersecurity only on the disinformation. Yeah, we're not only looking at what one is just describing, or Elina was mentioning, but we have to see on a more broad spectrum. That's why when we ask, what is Indonesia view on cybersecurity? And I always tell people that the way we look at cybersecurity now, with the lot of problems that we are facing, not only in Indonesia and also throughout the world, is we are seeing cybersecurity as now a national security issues. Yeah, that's why national security issues, because cybersecurity now affects, is being used, in every walks of life, in people's profession, in people's getting their work. Cybersecurity exists in every walks of life. That's why when one sector is affected by a cybersecurity problem, it will affect the other sector as well. So let's look at the numbers. Yeah, we see the big numbers. This is what Indonesia now stands. Yeah, we have an internet penetration now about 73.7%, almost 80% of internet penetration in Indonesia. Yeah, that is account for about 196 million people compared to our total population of 266 million. And this is a big number. It's not an easy task, to comprehend, but it requires a lot of work. And that's why we need to look why we have to see Indonesia not only as a small country, but we are big countries. Yeah, we have 266 million people, but unfortunately, the internet penetration only, is only widely covering only part of Indonesia, not the whole Indonesia. That's why there's still a lot of work to do for us. And the way we have to learn is we have to look at the facts. We just cannot look at the numbers alone. Yeah, there's so many elements contributing to the numbers. That's why we need to look all these numbers, all these elements very, very, very deep. Yeah, why these numbers keep increasing? So we have to go through the facts. And this is some of the issues that we tend to forget. Yeah, people forget that we came to this now because of so many technologies now converging into one. We don't even realize this now, but that's what the fact is like this. Long time ago, everything started with small things. Now it's becoming a single piece in the palm of your hand. Yeah, and this is also another issue that we have to understand. We have to look at the past. Yeah, it's no longer when we look at the internet and the problem we face. We have to look in the past. No longer we can just see the problem as it is, but we have to look at the history as well. Yeah, very important when we learn about the digitalization in every walk of life. And cybersecurity itself is not only what we know today. Yeah, it's an art. Yeah, cybersecurity is an art. It's a science, and it's also a battle for everyone involved in this ball game. And last but not least, cybersecurity is also a game of common sense. This is one thing that people don't realize, but it's becoming a common sense game for everyone involved. And when we talk about cyber attack, cyber attack don't happen just as it is. Yeah, that doesn't happen now. It's always happened. There's always some indication that happened before. Yeah, that's what we call a cycle, a chain of effect. Yeah, that precede before any attack. But this is a challenge for everybody to understand and recognize some of the symptoms. Like a medical doctor, when you get, you suffer or contracted influenza, a doctor will always ask you several questions, and that's how they will come into conclusion. But in cybersecurity, you have also to look at the similar way of approaching the problem. You cannot just come to conclusion that this is being attacked by so and so. This is the symptoms, yeah. But you have to look at the whole chain and cycle, how the cybersecurity breach intrusion happen, yeah. And this is not a challenge for Indonesia. We are now, unfortunately, I don't have the English article, but I'm quite sure that our translator can translate the visual that you see on the screen. This is what we are facing now. The government is also facing a big challenge, how to digitalize the government process, yeah, the government administration process. We are also now facing the pandemic with COVID. This is also accelerating everything with digitalization. We call it the digital transformation process in Indonesia. And President Joko Widodo also has institutionalized the process of digital transformation, which covers 5 areas. Yeah, this is one of the reform that he has introduced relating with digital transformation. And this is the big picture about Indonesia's big digital transformation program. Yeah, so many technologies, so many new buzzwords, so many phrases that I'm quite sure that I myself don't even understand all of them. It's so quick, so big, so rapid. Will take me a lifetime to learn all of this technology. And this is also what we call the octopus, the cybersecurity octopus, also quite big, various different area that we have to concentrate. Bear in mind, Indonesia just entered the cybersecurity area only recent, yeah, with the establishment of BSSN, the National Cryptography and Cybersecurity Agency, which was established in 2017. We still have a long way to go. And if you look at the octopus, it's quite large area that we have to cover, yeah. And this is also the big industrial sector that we have to protect. Yeah, we have 10 out of 16 critical infrastructure sectors in Indonesia. We have 4 being given national prioritization to be protected. Yeah, and I'm not going to through all the attacks, the symptoms. I think one also already covered this. So many form of threats. Everybody's a target. No one's immune to cyber attack. Yeah. And let's see what will be the impact of cyber attack. There's 3 phases of impact. First of all, the objective of cyber attack is to paralyze. Yeah. Once they are paralyzed, they are able to paralyze, then they will destroy. And finally, of course, it's creating panic. Yeah. This is actually what worries us at ICSF if we have reached the 2nd or the 3rd stage. Yeah. This is going to be very devastating to Indonesia, not only as a country, but also its economy and also its social environment and so on. Yeah. And then what else will happen? Yeah. And this is some of the indicators. If we cannot curtail any attack or cyber intrusion, yeah, because there are some elements which is not there, it's not being institutionalized in our framework. Yeah, one of the area is of course legal. There's also technical issues. There's also organizational readiness, which is a lot of organizations in Indonesia are not ready. Yeah, we cannot even talk about maturity. Capacity building, human resources is still very limited. Yeah, of course, cooperation. This is a big issue. We will talk about this on the discussion. And let's see the impact, the big impact of cyber attack. Yeah, these are the 4 areas. There are physical damage, economical damage, yeah, psychological trauma, and of course, the weakness of the posture in our security is exposed. Yeah, that's why we said that cyber attack, yeah, cybersecurity is becoming now a very serious national security issues. And what does it take to be able to be ready to face the cybersecurity challenge? There are 6 areas that we have to develop and should become a national program for Indonesia. There is, of course, organization readiness. Are we ready to face all the issues? We know what we are facing. Yeah, in situation awareness, of course, this is what we call intelligence. Our capability to, in cyber defense, to detect, yeah, and so on. And of course, so many other things that we need to discuss later on. There are challenges which, due to time limit, I cannot share, but we will raise this issue during our discussion. Having said that, let me just say one thing that, of course, everybody has mentioned that public-private partnership is important, but equally important is to understand what is called collaborative responsibility among us. Yeah, it's not no longer the responsibility of the government, the private sector, or the national crypto or cyber agency. Cybersecurity issues is the responsibility of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Ardi, for such informative presentation. And thank you for all the panelists. Now we are entering the Q&A session. And I think there has been several questions. And remarks. The first one is from Richard Marke. He note or suggests that the best method to stop spamming is to educate user about opening emails. I think it's suitable with one of the highest polling answer to provide cyber education on cyber hygiene as well as information. The second question, which is similar, we have two requests to share the files from the panelists, the presentation, if you both don't mind, Pak Ardi and Juan. So we will share them in the page of event at the Pacific Forum. We also have the last question from that we have right now. Maybe it's not the last, but the one that I share for now. Maybe this can be answered by the 3 panelists. From Hiu Sasong Kojati, based on past cyber incursion, what type of threat has risen significantly against Indo-Pacific states, and how have the government in the region adapted to this situation? Perhaps, firstly, I give the chance to Mr. Juan Hardoy to answer, to give a global outlook from the business perspective, because you have the tools. I know not all use Microsoft, but maybe you can see the trends from your side. Then I will give the opportunity to Ms. Elina Noor to see the regional perspective, and then I will give the chance to Pak Ardi. Now, Mr. Juan, if you don't mind.
Thank you for the questions. Excellent questions. So before I answer that one, I wanted to comment on the first question that was presented, which is education, if you allow me, Fitri, sorry. To me, education is key. I couldn't agree more with you. Now, we should bear in mind that there's no silver bullet, right? We must concentrate on all pillars, including a strong public-private partnership to be able to combat cybercrime and reduce it. But I agree with you, education is super important. We need everybody. As Ardi was saying, cybersecurity is everybody's business, and it starts with education. What have we seen in terms of trends globally? I think it was clearly stated during this forum that the world has become a lot more digital, a lot faster over the last year, right? We have seen an increase in remote learning, remote working, mobility, people working from home. I'm still working from home. Hopefully, we'll all be able to go back to our offices, at least part-time, or the children to school. But the pandemic has changed the world in many important ways. And technology is an evident one, right? As the world became a lot more digital, cyber criminals became a lot more active too. And they have quickly increased their attacks, their infrastructure, the criminal infrastructure, and the adoption of new technologies and the latest technologies. As we have adopted new technologies like this great tool to be able to be communicating with all of you today, criminals are adopting other tactics and other technologies, like, for instance, cloud computing, right? The cloud, same as the internet, offers great advantages, but only if it's properly used. And it is essential that we maintain the trust in the internet and in these new technologies. If not, nobody will be able to use them and benefit from them. Governments are not going to be able to offer more new social services to citizens if we cannot trust the internet. So quick adoption by criminals of new technologies, sophistication in their attacks. We have seen, just to call out the last observation, an increase on nation-state attacks. Cybercrime probably started many decades ago as a hobby to hack into companies, right, by maybe kids. And then it quickly became an economic crime. It turned into an economic crime for the money. Lately, we have seen that on top of that, there's been an increase on nation-state attacks. So one government attacking the citizens of another country, sometimes leveraging that criminal infrastructure that has been used for economic crimes. Unfortunately, there's a tendency that that has grown during this pandemic, and it's becoming more difficult to resolve it and to face it. In Microsoft, we concentrate also in protecting our customers against nation-state attacks, and we have written and spoken about it, and we have brought legal actions against it.
Thank you, Juan. Maybe Elina can continue?
Yeah, sure. I think just to add on to what Juan has said about cybercrime reporting is often what is most publicly and extensively documented. And I would argue that one of the reasons is because it's probably the least controversial aspect of the menu of different operations that are out there. And in a theoretical sense, we can all agree that cyber criminals are bad, and we have an idea of what these criminals might be, who they might be, what they're up to, especially if those crimes have to do with ransomware or phishing. And so it's most tangible in our minds, at least. But as Juan also indicated, the rise of nation-state attacks is something that we don't often talk about in this region and in Southeast Asia. And that has to do with the political sensitivity of what it involves. For a long time, the region has been a target of advanced persistent threats for geopolitical objectives. And we have not yet had an open and honest discussion about what that means for the region moving forward. Perhaps it's something that we can do in a more private setting amongst ourselves at the track 2 level, escalating it to the track 1 level. But I think SolarWinds particularly has exposed just how much of a trend this might end up being, even for us in Southeast Asia. So the distinction between things like espionage and whether 5 months or 5 to 10 years down the road, it will escalate into something more physical is something that we in this region, in the Southeast Asian region, need to take a lot more seriously, because we need to figure out what measures are available to us to counter those type of nation state measures and operations, as well as the countermeasures that are viable in international law and that we have the capability to execute.
Thank you, Elina, for your answer. I will give the chance to Pak Ardi for your answer, because I think there's a lot of comment about how Indonesia is, have to grapple with the increased number of attack.
Well, thank you, Fitri and Juan and Elina. Of course, yeah, Indonesia, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, is we're actually new in this ball game, in the cybersecurity ball game. So we still have to do a lot of catch up with the region, with Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, and the other members of ASEAN. We still have a lot to learn, and because apart from this is something very new to us, we also have a very limitation. We have various limitation. Among them is the human resources, the human capabilities to address these issues from technical standpoint, also from regulatory standpoint, as well. Analysts, analysts in this area is very scarce. So this is a very big task for us nationally. It will become a very national mission for everyone involved, not only the government, but also the private sector and the other sector involved. Education system also will be involved. So it's a big task for us. But the other thing that we have also to realize, I mentioned also in my presentation, that is cybersecurity is an art. It's an art. It's a science. It's a battle, and it's also a game of common sense. Why is it common sense? Because criminals, the nature of criminals, they adapt and they adopt, meaning that they're not behind in technology. They will exploit technology to their advantage. They'll find a loophole to exploit and take advantage and make, at the end of the day, it's all economic motivation for them. But the biggest challenge for Indonesia, despite the big numbers also lies with a lot of lack of knowledge about the digital, the development of the digital technology, the use of the digital technologies, and we're not a digital savvy or technologists. Indonesia are not the developer of technology, or we're an inventor of technology. We're consumers. Majority of the number that I have shown you, we are consumers. So we ourselves also have to learn. And who's going to teach us? Bear in mind, 1976, we were the third country in the world to operate and manage our own commercial satellite after the US and Canada. And what has happened from then on? Nothing. So again, we have a lot of catch up to do with the rest of the world. So if the numbers keep increasing, as mentioned on various statistics, Kaspersky, don't be surprised at the numbers, because, the facts is like that. We cannot change the fact. Now, the challenge for us is to work together to understand this whole issue of digital transformation and the risk of cybersecurity.
Thank you, Pak Ardi. Thank you, and all the panelists. We have a stream of questions ongoing in the Q&A. Feel free if the panelists want to address them by typing, but I got this note from the organizer that I should encourage participants that want to ask in Bahasa Indonesia, do not hesitate to ask your question. We have many questions now. The one that has been noted on the registration is that what are the steps that Indonesia and US have taken to ensure data in the two countries threats remain safe and protected. And we know that there is this controversy on data storage, and we know big countries will want to have data stored in their own preference, and how perhaps the US and Indonesia would address that. That's the first question. The second question is, how do you actually assess, I think this is for Pak Ardi, to assess cybersecurity threats? Pak Ardi and maybe Juan, especially in the US and Indonesia, maybe in Elina, maybe in the region, what's the measurement? Is there any statistic that perhaps people that is not knowledgeable or expert in cybersecurity can look up, like that is available online or accessed by public? And maybe I limit the question to this question for now. The third question is, with the future wars almost about to be cyber wars, what Biswat Mohapatra means by cyber hacking, does one see the end of ends for traditional military-led wars or kinetic wars, I guess? So I guess this is all very inspirational to answer, or very the issue of our time. So again, I would give the panelists the opportunity to answer. Mr. Juan, do you mind to start first? Thank you.
Super interesting questions. So in terms of sources, there's a lot published on the internet that you could access. There's security reports by Microsoft that you can read and for free and access on Microsoft.com about trends on cybersecurity, and information that we publish for the public to stay safe, and educate everybody on the threats and trends on cybersecurity. Then there's publications by many security companies also that can be consulted, and also by governments. I think governments are doing a good job in trying to keep up with this challenge and informing their critical infrastructure, their citizens across the world. The problem is that there is an important deficit internationally of cybersecurity professionals today. Everybody is facing that, from Microsoft to the small and medium business. And it becomes concerning when it affects smaller organizations that don't have the resources to protect themselves. So it is important to be informed, but it's also important to be prepared, right? And to be ready. And I was talking about, for instance, ransomware. When ransomware affects municipalities that may not be prepared to face or anticipate this type of crime, it really affects those organizations across the world. We have seen them. And it also affected hospitals, ransomware. And if they're not prepared on cybersecurity, because their expertise is healthcare, it's going to be very difficult to recover from one of those attacks. So what I'm trying to present here is that there is a lot of information, but what we need to concentrate on, and what governments and NGOs and companies can promote more, is the development of more cybersecurity professionals like the ones participating in this panel, because cyber criminals, as I said, are well financed, are growing, and are well equipped.
Thank you, Sir Juan Hardoy. Elina?
Yeah, there were so many questions in so many different directions. Let me just pick up on the one that you had addressed to me, but I also wanted to touch a little bit about data localization, which you implied, Fitri. I think right now there is this tug of war between what seems to be a free trade versus protectionist / data localization war, if you will, particularly in the economic sphere, to do with cross-border data flows. And I think right now Indonesia is erring on the side of data localization, which may in the long run prove to be the wiser thing to do, or it might not, depending on how the current debate about who owns data plays out. And there are so many resources related to this. Again, if people are interested, there is this whole idea of data colonization that is a separately interesting topic, but it is something that developing countries in the global south will have to take into account, particularly as Pa Ardi mentioned, most of us are users and consumers of these technologies, and we hardly have ownership or control over these technologies that we are sold and marketed to. So it's every country will have to decide based on their own national interests. But to the question, Fitri, about the future of war, I guess, I think the future of war is already here. And what you might see, perhaps, I don't know, in 20 to 50 years' time, everything might be cyber-based, but I am a little less optimistic about that because right now we already see a hybrid system of kinetic and cyber warfare. And a lot of the kinetic means of warfare is already being executed through digital ways. So we are already in that age where, you know, aircraft carriers are online, and every pilot or captain needs to be able to be digitally literate. So we probably have more to look forward to, but we also have to be very aware of where we are now, and which is why I mentioned in my initial remarks the importance of understanding what the implications of the application of international law means to us in this region. And I'm happy to go into that further later on.
Later on, if we have time. Thank you, Elina. Now I give the chance to Pa Ardi.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this issue of threat assessment, is not something which is quite easy to do, given the symptom, or the form of attack, is keep changing, because that's why they call it APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, because the threat itself, the signature is not always the same. It keeps changing by the day, by the minute, by the second. That's why it's going to be difficult. The key, of course, has to be with how to develop the human talent, the human talent to go into this area of cybersecurity. We need that. We need more analysts to be trained to understand the threat. Of course, the other important thing that I must mention, but I have to apologize to Juan from our colleague from Microsoft. I think there's a lot of room to go also with the technologies, the technology owner, because there's a question that now is on a lot of discussion table. To what extent does all the technology company takes responsibility for what is been been happening now. This is also one question. To what extent do they take responsibility of all this problem that we are now facing? Because all this time is everybody just talk about how good their technology is. This is what they can do, all the advantage. But what have they done to the consumer? Have they trained them properly? This is the same issue I asked my colleague at Samsung, Nokia many years ago, BlackBerry. What have you done to train, protect your consumers? Have you trained them? Ask them all this question and say, we have print the book, the manual of our device. We have print the manual device. And I asked them, have you ever seen your own manual? I have seen the manual, but every time I need to read them, I need to use a magnifying glass to read them. So small, And this is one of the social issues that we're facing every day, on the consumer side. The other thing that is troubling me, with the threat, the warfare, as Elina was mentioning, is actually already happening, but it's not being seen by common people. It's a war below the surface, we call it. Above the surface, you can see all the battleship, you can see all the planes, but you cannot see what's happening below the surface, which is now happening. So these are issues that everybody should understand, and it's going to affect a lot of our life we're not aware of this, and we don't have properly trained people to understand what we're seeing, because now it's just becoming a very complicated technology, and the warfare is just so many in many various forms. And one of the things that is also haunting us, I think it should be haunting everybody in the panel as well as the audience, is what we call the boogeyman. The boogeyman, what is the boogeyman? The boogeyman for us is the Cambridge Analytica. No one ever realized it, but I tell you, it can happen to any of us, any country in the world, and it can change the government in anywhere in the world. That's why we need to work together to understand all these issues.
Thank you, Pak Ardi. Thank you, all the panelists. I think because of the time limitation, we can only go for the last question session. I know I acknowledge the raise hand in the participant side, but because of the many overflowing question, I would take my deliberation to just note the question already organized by the team, done by the organizer. Firstly, on cyber hygiene, I think also following up, Ardi mentioned, maybe this could be one. We would go to the security by design right now, right? But still, people, the public need to know about cyber hygiene. This question is from Yusrael in Bahasa. So, what should one be concerned when they use the internet and the cyber sphere? What are the information need to be protected? And for Pak Ardi especially, you were mentioning about demographic bonus in Indonesia. Leonard Harrison asked, isn't it Indonesia with many young population these days can have more talent to work in the digital sector, as they know more, they're more agile. But then whether these young people know more about rules, regulation, potential threats, that should be still the question. Second, on cyber-related legislation and regulation, what can we do for the panelists to speed up the exchange of investigation, or to speed up the legislation, as well as to exchange the investigative information to help to process the criminal or the non-traditional crimes? What steps do you recommend to speed up reliable and court-accepted exchange of data? This question is from Stephen Curler. And as well, in the same question, specifically for Pak Ardi on legislation, how can Indonesia mitigate or respond cybercrime? Because there's still a lack of law in terms of cybersecurity. What do you say about that? Lastly, on cyber infrastructure, is any of the major cyber criminal infrastructure, server teams, etc., can be based around the world, can be investigated, or what jurisdiction it is? How about in Indonesia? Again, this question probably for Pak Ardi, and especially for the critical infrastructure related to nuclear facilities in Indonesia. What have been done to protect the reactors in Indonesia? I know it could be for other panelists as well. If you want to help Pak Ardi to answer, it's quite a lot of question. I give the opportunity for Juan first, maybe to give answer and comments, and then Elina, and then Pak Ardi, and then after that I will close the session of question and answer. Please, Mr. Juan Hardoy.
Thank you. And let me start by saying that to Ardi and Elina, that your feedback is well taken. And when it comes to cyber hygiene, there's many questions. I'll try to touch upon some of those very quickly to allow time for the other panelists to respond. When it comes to cyber hygiene, the question reminds me that cyber criminals and hackers don't hack into, they log in. Okay, they don't hack in, they log in. And this is because they get people's credentials. They obtain them somehow. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. Yes, it is the responsibility of cloud services, of software developers, having security by design, like Microsoft, and investing billions of dollars in security. And at the same time, it's a responsibility of everybody, right? On being informed, on taking certain measures like dual factor authentication, navigating safely on the internet, being aware of the different types of cybercrime vectors or attack vectors that exist to try to stay protected. And assume that somebody in every organization, at least one person, will click on everything. So we have to assume that the attackers will get in, and we have to design security bearing that in mind. Many questions were presented. So cyber hygiene is one thing. Would you remind me, Fitri, another topic before I turn it over to my colleague panelists?
Cyber hygiene, legislation, and critical infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. I'm a lawyer, so I should be commenting on legislation, right? We know that laws were not written many years ago, bearing in mind the cybercrime types and vectors we are facing today, right? Some countries have legislations that are more developed than others, and it is a challenge to investigate and prosecute crimes for law enforcement and for us collaborating with them through the right legal means and due process, following due process. It is a challenge when there is not an international legal system that allows that public-private partnership to be stronger, right? Exchanging evidence, yes, that's an issue. There are some initiatives around the world that are trying to tackle this problem in the European Union on e-evidence, in countries around the world that we could take as an example. But this remains a problem. That's why the secret sauce, I say, for trying to tackle that problem where criminals are residing in one country and the victims are in another, and the evidence could be in a third country or many other countries, is to have public-private partnerships working together, private sector, public sector, academia, NGOs, all together.
Thank you, Juan, for your answer. I give the mic to Elina.
Thanks, Fitri. I didn't hear any particular questions directed to me, but maybe I will answer, if you don't mind. There was a question directed at me by Denai Guna about cyber resilience. I think maybe to piggyback on Juan's point about public-private partnerships, I think this is very useful to promote cyber resilience, particularly within a country. And I mentioned it in my remarks, but I also want to offer an example in Japan where domestic larger tech companies have sort of taken smaller companies under their wing to offer cybersecurity as a free good to promote public cybersecurity, because there is little economic incentive for smaller companies to go through the whole tedious process of ensuring all the right cybersecurity measures in place, particularly with little capital, with the MSMEs, as I mentioned, little human resources and capacity. And so perhaps there may be the larger, mythical creatures in Indonesia, not the Garuda, but the unicorns and the decacorn that I mentioned, that can offer that sort of a service as sort of their corporate social responsibility to promote cybersecurity among the new entrepreneurs, smaller ones in Indonesia. Thanks.
Thank you, Elina. Maybe that's a call for Microsoft to provide help for the small, medium industries. We're welcoming. I will hand the mic to Pak Ardi to answer three topics, the cyber hygiene, legislation, as well as critical infrastructure. Pak Ardi.
Thank you, Fitri. The three questions I just think had thought that all the three questions actually is something that I've been doing for the last 30 years, I think. And if I have to tell a story from let's say from San Francisco to New York, it will take ages to complete the story. But to sum the story short, it's a daunting task for all of us. I have seen a lot of things in the last 30 years in this area of technology. Starting from the crudest form of technologies until the complex technology that we're facing now. But again, I must emphasize that we're consumers. Yeah, we don't know nothing about how the handphone was made. What are the components inside the smartphones? We have to accept that for a fact. We're not tech savvy. Having a handphone in our hand does not consider us to be a tech savvy. We just know how to use it. We're not Bill Gates. We're not Elon Musk. We're not Juan Hardoy. But the truth is, we have a lot to learn. That's why when we talk about cyber hygiene, I still remember some years ago, we still use the word not cyber hygiene. We have the word netiquette, which is part of etiquette on the internet, which people don't even use anymore. It's gone. What happened? We keep changing the phrase, the terms every year, but the basic's still there. And being an Asian, I'm quite sure one knows this as well. Elina knows this. Our parents teach us at home, how to respect people, and look at your elders, But do some of this wise teaching from home still exist now? I think that's the basic that we have to approach this issue about cyber hygiene. The other thing about cyber hygiene, unfortunately, I could not go through the slide. There was one frame that actually I want to emphasize, but anyhow, I'm going to share the slide with the audience. But the most important thing about cyber hygiene is not only talking about technology; it's talking about the basic things. Yeah, working together, knowing the risks. Yeah, mutual respect. Yeah, and one more thing, you want to learn about cybersecurity. One important element, knowing the foreign language, is very important, because a lot of the references about cybersecurity that I have in my library, apparently is all in English. Everything that I get from the internet, the people sharing intelligence with me, all in English. This is also a challenge for us, for a non-English speaking country. Yeah, and this is just only a glimpse what we're facing. The other thing that we talk about, let's say, what was the other thing? We talk about regulatory issues. One thing I must also remind everyone: don't approach cybersecurity from the bureaucratic perspective. It's the wrong thing. By the time you act together, I would say the country will be troubled. Everything is going to be devastated. So that's why it's very important when we talk about cyber regulation. Everybody has embed within the industry to understand. How can you regulate something that you don't understand? These are very, very key issues that we're facing with regulatory issues. Yeah, you have to know, you have to understand what you want to regulate. If you don't embed yourself in the industry, don't understand the landscape, there's nothing to regulate. Yeah, this is very important. The other thing is touch about critical infrastructure. Yeah, we are, again, a lot of the protection technology that we use now is reliant on third parties' use. We don't even develop indigenous technology ourselves. That's why I don't think attack will be there. Yeah, cyber intrusion, cyber incursion, yeah, cyber warfare will always be there, unless we work together to understand the potential threat. Then we can at least minimize the damage. But unless we work together, you cannot. One more point that I want to stress that apart from working together, is also knowing who you work with. In our industry, that's why this kind of forum is very important, is the networking. If you get a flat tire on the street, nowadays you cannot just ask any strangers on the street to help you out. You have to ask somebody that you know. Otherwise, you get robbed in the middle of the street. The world is not safe anymore. That's why we need to work with people that we know, we trust. Of course, people that we know, like people in this forum. We know them. Otherwise, they will not share you information that they have. And you cannot work. You cannot understand what is cybersecurity and what are the symptoms, what are the attacks, and so on. That was my statement, Fitri. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Ardi. Thank you all the panelists. Mr. Juan Hardoy, I'm just trying to be coy. I think cyber security is the responsibility of all, not only big companies, also the small, medium, and also the user need to be educated and use the internet responsibly, as Pak Ardi mentioned about the netiquette. Thank you, Elina Noor, for your insight and original cyber trends and challenges, and also Pak Ardi for your overview of Indonesia. Now I return the screen to Krista. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fitri, and thank you to our esteemed panelists, including Elina, who stayed up quite late at this point for this program, and participants for joining us today. We couldn't get to all of the great questions that were sent in, but we hope that this is only the beginning, not the end, of the dialogue between the US and Indonesia on cybersecurity. We hope you'll continue staying engaged with Pacific Forum programming, which you can find out more about on our website, www.pacforum.org. The third session of this series will be held next month on regional trade and security. It will focus on how Indonesia and Southeast Asia as a whole can rebound from the challenges of the past year, in which countries across the region saw growth contract due to the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting border and closures. This session will explore how this challenge can be addressed by ASEAN as a whole, along with other transnational challenges such as terrorism, refugee crises, the erosion of democratic institutions, and maritime security. Please stay tuned for more details. So far, confirmed speakers include Dr. Amy Seawright, Senior Associate for Asia at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, and the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South and Southeast Asia, who will talk about US-China competition for influence in ASEAN in the post-COVID-19 era. Finally, I'd like to remind you of the post-event survey, which we'll share again in the chat box now. We'd really appreciate if you would just take a few minutes to complete it and share your feedback, particularly since this is the second in a series of 9 sessions, and we want to make them as engaging and productive as possible for you. Thank you again to our speakers for joining us today, to our partner CSIS, and especially Fitri, and to the US Embassy Jakarta for making this event possible. We hope that we'll see you at the next events in our series. Goodbye.
Thank you.